My name is Teresa Winston. I am the chair of the newly created Democratic Committee of Chesterfield. Totally long overdue, but I'm going to take this moment to ask if anybody wants to get involved with us. It's really super fun and super rewarding because it's something our community has needed for a long time. So please sign up. We can at least send you information in case you're interested in joining us. And we really feel that it's our responsibility not to shove a candidate down your throat, but to bring the candidates in front of you so that you can ask questions, so that you can make the decision that's best for you and your family. That's really important to us.
Thank you.
I am now going to turn this over to our wonderful moderator and president of the Grange, John Sokol.
Thank you very much. Some of the many things that Teresa's involved in are part of our Grange here, of which I am the president, fortunate enough for a term to help round up the troops here to keep the building going and keep it as a place of community in Keysville. And if you've never been here, please, after the event, please feel free to look around and we'll give you a tour if you'd like. There's some interesting things in the basement and some interesting things upstairs. But Teresa is also involved in an offshoot of the Grange called For the Common Good. And it's a group that got together after the election and has been very active and powerful right here in our community. And one of the things they have is a food pantry. We started a pop-up local food pantry, and we have an event next Sunday from 1 to 3 here for canned and non-perishables, free to all in need. Just some of the many things we do here at the Grange to try to bring the community together, and this is one of them too. I mentioned, I think, to Dylan that we had a local election here in the town of Chesterfield, and we had a candidate forum, and it was very well attended, like this is today. So it's great to see people concerned about their community and trying to give voice to that. I have a lot of questions here, but we'll also have an open period where you can ask a question from the floor if you have one that may develop during this presentation. With the 2026 midterm elections approaching, the NY21 has an open seat since the incumbent decided to spend more time with her family. Not that there's anything wrong with it. The primary election is scheduled for June 23rd, and graciously, Dylan Hewitt and Stuart have agreed, Moriel, right? Yes. Moriel? Sorry. Both running to represent the North Country in the 21st District. The other nominee from the 2025 special election, Blake Genevieve, could not join us today, citing scheduling conflicts. However, we did save him a seat, just in case. Even a bottle of water, if he would like to come join us. But I'm not holding my breath. Of note, our two guests today are amassing signatures for their petitions to be on the ballot. If you have not, you do have to be a registered Democrat to sign a petition, and you also have to have not signed anyone else's petition for this position. So that will take place after the presentation, and please sign early and often. Oh wait, that's a bad joke. Yeah, early is good. Again, not so much. Each candidate will have 5 minutes to introduce themselves briefly and then talk about their candidacy, and then we'll have a Q&A session followed by a closing statement from each and a chance to mix it up after the event, just chat amongst, mingle and enjoy the time we have with these candidates. Dylan Hewitt is a proud South Glens Falls native, worked as a Deputy Assistant U.S. Trade Representative in the Biden White House, endorsed by the Working Families Party. Top campaign focus: expanding healthcare access and Medicare for all, expanding child care, affordable housing, defending immigrant communities and rural issues like long drives for healthcare. And I may have also heard that he chaired the South Hyde Marathon dance a while back.
I did.
I couldn't find any pictures of it though.
Oh, I got plenty.
Maybe later. Next, Stuart Averiel is the owner of the Pickled Pig restaurant in Lake Placid, a fine establishment, I might add. His platform includes rebuilding the North Country quality of life. He identifies as the independent Democrat and seeks common ground with political opponents, criticizing both major parties, particularly on immigration, for failing to compromise over decades, which led to a broken system. Amen. His stance on reform prioritizes due process, human rights, and the economic needs of the North Country, as well as breaking partisan gridlock. You can ask about the Republicans running in this position, but we all know how that goes. So, let's start with Dylan to give approximately 5 minutes on who you are and what's going on.
Well, thank you. Am I on?
You're on.
Okay, awesome. Thanks so much for having me. It's so great to see everybody. I'm Dylan Hewitt. I'm a 7th generation upstate New Yorker, born and raised in Southlands Falls. My family has lived across NY21 and in the North Country for nearly 200 years, dating back to the American Revolution. And I was raised in a family that believed that freedom isn't just an idea, it's a promise. It's a promise that each and every one of you, everyone by your side, your neighbors, your friends, your family, deserve a life of dignity and the opportunity to thrive. You know, I learned that from my grandpa Tom, who grew up extremely poor in the Great Depression. He was the youngest of 3 boys to a single mom who couldn't afford to raise them. And he was given up. He was taken in by his Aunt Lillian down the street, and he got by because his neighbors fed him through their back window. It's also how he met my grandmother, because my grandmother was his neighbor's daughter. And he went off to World War II, and he came back to a country that took care of its own, where freedom wasn't an idea, it was a promise to a better life, where government actually made our lives better. He got a fair shot and a good education on the GI Bill. He got a pathway to home ownership. He got a strong union middle-class salary as a public school teacher over in Hadley, Luzerne for 40 years. And I know that that promise has disappeared for too many families in the North Country, generation after generation. I'm 33. I'm part of a new generation of leadership that's ready to go to Congress and fight with a spine to make sure that we guarantee that promise once again. I've held a top secret clearance and served our country. I've worked on economic issues around trade deals and tariffs, things that I know have been wielded against us as tools of corruption to hollow out the North Country and reward big billionaires and businesses and billionaires time and again. I'm running to make sure that we raise wages and lower costs, that we guarantee healthcare as a human right with Medicare for all, that we expand childcare and make sure families are set up for success and stay here in the North Country. But that is a movement that is up against headwinds time and again. Big billionaires have a chokehold on our democracy. Big monopolies have rigged economies in America for far too long. And it's time we break them up. It's time we get back our freedom from those who have sold us out time and again. So I'm asking you to join me in that fight. A fight that guarantees a promise to our neighbors. A fight in the North Country where we were handed a legacy of freedom in the American Revolution from the generations before us. A fight that says to the generations that come after us that they deserve a life of dignity again, that they deserve a full-time job that pays enough to raise our families. Healthcare that they can depend on so they don't go bankrupt or have to check their bank account before they walk into a doctor's office. A guarantee of dignity so that we rebuild an America that is once again seen as a beacon of hope across the globe. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to answer all of your questions. Probably wasn't 5 minutes, but I've tailored this down to make sure that we can answer more questions than anything else. So I'm so excited to be here. Thanks so much.
Stuart.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you all for having me here, and thank you all for coming. We are in this position in our democracy because we got complacent about it. We got comfortable. We thought, what's happening right now could never happen in America. And it's because of that complacency that this is what's occurring. And the way that we fight that is by doing what we're doing right now, by people showing up, listening to candidates, and more importantly, getting involved in their community, their civic organizations, their nonprofits. This is how we make change, not just within our government, but within our communities. And that is our strength. We will fix things from the bottom up, from our communities. They are our strength. We cannot look to Washington to solve our problems. They can't, and they shouldn't. Our strength is here. It's in our civic organizations. It's in our houses of worship. It's in our nonprofits. It's in our neighbors that show up to pull each other out of snowbanks. This is our strength, and this is what we have to hold on to. So I greatly appreciate everybody showing up to hear us today. Also, before we begin, I think in a few days it's his birthday, so let's wish him a happy birthday. I will also say my birthday is coming up at the beginning of April, so that means we are less than a month apart, which I wish I could also say about the year, but I can't. So happy birthday. Absolutely. So, yes, I own the Pickled Pig. I've owned that for about 10 years. Prior to that, my family is originally, I'm the third generation in northern New York. My family, both sides, are from Tupper Lake. I was born in Maryland, where they moved just before I was born. I was raised there, and then 10 years ago we moved back with my family, my two daughters, my wife, one of my daughters, which is the one with the blue hair in the back, and my wife are here. Hi, baby. Yes. Sorry, you chose to have blue hair, so you can't hide, sit down. And what did it take to die? Like 6-7 hours? Something like that? Anyway, inside joke. So, prior to that, I studied political science at Loyola University in Maryland, international relations at Catholic University in Belgium, and for the prior 10 years I've opened the Pickled Pig. And I've been frustrated for the prior 10 years. I really didn't have a thought, an ambition to run for Congress, but I was frustrated. I was frustrated as a community member, as a business owner, and as a neighbor. I had seen people constantly priced out of the North Country. We had people that moved up here. They tried to make it work. They loved the beauty of this area. Young people that said, you know what, I want to move there, I want to raise my family in the North Country. And they worked for us. We hired them, we built a relationship with them, they became family. And almost every single time they left within a year, 2-year max. And they didn't leave because they didn't like the area, they couldn't afford it. It was just not, it was too hard. Rent was ridiculous. They had no chance. They looked at it and they said, we have no chance of buying a house. We can't put any savings together if we're living here, and how would we ever put a down payment down? And this is what they're concerned about. Then people with young children, they couldn't find childcare. When I moved up here 10 years ago, it took 1 year. We were on a wait list for 1 year to get childcare. How can we expect people to build families and live here if they can't get childcare? If you can't find elder care to take care of aging people, your aging family, your aging parents, how can we expect that? If you can't, not only is healthcare too expensive, but if you live here, it might take you 2 hours to get to an appointment for the specialist. You can't find a preferred care provider. These are the things that I saw our employees struggle with. We would hire them and they struggled, and they would ask for help. They would say, Stuart, we need some help with this. And we would try to work with them, but it was a red flag. Whenever they came to me and said, Stuart, I knew it was coming. I knew 3-4 months they'd be coming to me and saying, Stuart, we hate to tell you this, but we're leaving. That frustrated me for 10 years, but that wasn't the tipping point. The tipping point, if you happen to see a video I posted yesterday, but I've been talking about it for a while, was in October. That's when I decided I was going to get involved in this race for Congress. Prior to that, I was just frustrated, trying to make change on the community level. But back in October, I got a call from one of my employees that said, hey, did you know Emmanuel, one of my other employees, was just arrested by ICE? At this point, I was like, well, shouldn't be a problem, because he's legally authorized to live and work here. So it'll be okay. We'll figure it out. I'm sure it's just whatever. So a couple days goes by. We're trying to figure it out. He's not released. So we're able to contact him. And apparently they didn't care that he was legally authorized to live and work here. They actually gave him a piece of paper and said, we need you to sign this saying that you agree to be deported. And because they couldn't just deport him because he had his papers. So you need to sign this document saying that you agree to allow us to do this. And he didn't. And they said, if you don't, we're going to put you on a plane and we're going to send you to a prison in El Salvador. He's from Venezuela, but this is when everything was going on with those prisons. I don't know that they actually would have done that. I mean, I still don't think that they would have. I think they used that to pressure him to sign the document. But still, when I heard this, I got frustrated and I got mad. And I'm like, this is not America. This is, I don't care if you're Republican or Democrat, this is not who we are as a people. And then I hired an attorney for him. And they said, fine, you know what, you got an attorney. We're not going to put you on a plane and send you to El Salvador. What we are going to do is have you sit in this jail cell for probably about a year, because that's how long it takes for the immigration courts to process cases. So feel free to sit here in this jail cell for a year until a judge determines what to do. Or sign the paper and we'll send you back to Venezuela. He signed the paper. He went back because he said, as bad as it is there, he couldn't imagine sitting in this jail cell in a place he didn't know with people around him that were certainly not looking out for his best interest. So he signed the paper and he is back in Venezuela. And that night, I Googled, have you run for Congress? And then shortly after that, from the back of my pickup truck at John Brown Farm, I stood up and I said, we all have to come together. I will stop there because I know I went over 5 minutes. I apologize. Thank you again.
Well, I know what at least two of your answers are going to be. What do you see as the top 3 needs and concerns in the North Country? Immigration, affordability, to use an old-fashioned word.
Yes. Affordability. I haven't heard that in the race.
Yeah, not at all, right?
Yes. So you're right. Yes. Immigration, affordability. I think housing and healthcare. These are all interrelated issues. You can't solve one without solving the other. We talk about jobs. We talk about the economy, immigration. They're all related to these other issues. If you don't solve housing and healthcare, you can't fix the economy. Because, hey, you're not going to have a workforce if people can't find a place to live. So housing is related to healthcare, as it's related to immigration, as it's related to the economy. So I would say all 4 of those things we have to work on, and it's what I call rebuilding the quality of life. That's how I look at the umbrella thing. The quality of life is, can you afford to have a place to live? Can you afford your healthcare so you know that you can get taken care of, either with an issue you have, or God forbid if something comes up, so you don't have to fear that. Those are the things that I think we have to focus on. Are you afraid to go to the mailbox because your utility bill might be there? Those are the things that diminish the quality of life. And, you know, I often give the metaphor, if I'm speaking too loudly, I apologize. This is why I pushed the microphone away a little bit. JJ knows that.
Yes.
But, you know, I give the metaphor of a frog. I didn't make up this metaphor. So hopefully you've heard it, otherwise you might think I'm pretty sadistic. But a frog in a pot of water that's on the stove, and you turn the burner on. As the pot gets warm and warmer, the frog could jump out. He could jump out of the water, but he doesn't, because he doesn't realize it's getting hotter and hotter and hotter until he's dead. Again, I didn't make this metaphor up, but this is what they say is the case. They say that's where we are. We don't realize that it's getting harder and harder and harder and harder until at some point we just can't take it anymore. And that's what we have to fight. Where we are today in terms of quality of life is ridiculous. And there are a lot of things we have to focus on, but these, our communities, and these quality of life issues need to take precedent. We should not be looking at one other thing in Congress without asking the question, does it make life easier or more difficult for those people in our communities? There are other important issues, but these have to come first.
Thanks, Stuart.
Absolutely.
Dylan, what do you see as 3 top needs and concerns in the North Country in sort of rank order?
Yeah. You know, I feel like every day I wake up and this administration tells us that there's not enough money for healthcare. There's not enough money to give our teachers a raise or keep our elementary school right here in this community open. There's not enough money to help our small businesses or make sure that we extend the ACA subsidies, but there's suddenly enough money for war. And this corrupt administration and the pay-to-play politics in Washington is robbing us of our tax dollars, $11,500 every single second to send more bombs overseas in an illegal war. And that is top of mind for me right now. How we are taking away from communities like ours to engage in another foreign conflict, another foreign war, where my generation has already lived through too. We know families across the North Country that have sent their loved ones abroad already and have paid the price for freedom. I don't want to see that happen again. In another conflict where we haven't been entangled in a region that we know that will have lasting consequences on our economy right here at home, and the lives of loved ones that we know right here in the North Country, from Fort Drum all the way across the Adirondacks and down to the very southern tip of this district. It's top of mind for me every single day. And it makes me sick that the Pentagon yesterday, or 2 days ago at this point, asked for another $200 billion for this war. $200 billion. By the end of this month, we will have spent enough money to have extended the ACA subsidies, enough money to lower childcare costs to $10 a day, enough money to build thousands, hundreds of thousands of new homes, enough money to keep 5 of our hospitals in the North Country from closing, and yet they told us there was never enough money for that. And somehow there's enough money for another foreign conflict. That's number one. Number two is that we need to make sure that our young people are staying here. We have a brain drain. We have an aging population that's on a fixed income. We need to make sure that our economy works for them. That billionaires like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates are paying into Social Security to make it solvent for generations to come. Right now, there's a Social Security cap that stops billionaires and millionaires from paying into Social Security after $180,000. On January 1st, every single year, that is 15 seconds into January 1st for Elon Musk. We just hit the day that it would stop for Jeff Bezos. And folks like us, we're paying into Social Security every single day of the year. It is on our backs. It's money that we've paid into and we're owed. And somehow they want to take it away from us. We need to make sure that our seniors have the resources to live and age with dignity, a dignified retirement for our union workers. I believe that we need to fix Tier 6 for our teachers and our firefighters and our corrections officers. And we also need to make sure that we're expanding childcare and affordable homes for our young people. Number 3 for me is tariffs, small businesses that are squeezed out by big monopolies right here, that like National Grid or big tech, big pharma, and big ag, that keep rewriting the rules in Washington and telling us that we don't have a place in the market. I've worked on tariffs and trade deals, and Donald Trump owes us our money back. Those tariffs were illegal. They decimated our local economies across the North Country. Lake George, Lake Placid have seen low tax revenue on record during the summer months. I'm worried about what ski season looks like for our economies up here. And we need to make sure that we have fair trade deals that empower small businesses to have fair market access, to be able to compete against big monopolies, and that we finally give folks like us a fair shot at success.
Thanks, Dylan. Stuart, in New York 21, as an elected representative in the House of Representatives, how much control do you really have? You represent the 21st, but will you be able to represent our local needs? How will you do that with all the competing national interests?
Yeah, I thought about this a lot, and I should be thinking about the campaign, but for some reason, I often find myself, well, great, you're out there talking about what you want to do, and I ask myself, how would I do it? And I'm like, if I get there, what am I going to do? How am I going to actually make these things real? Because in the end, that's what's important. We can talk about what we want, and I'm sure that we're all being honest about those things, but the question is, how do you achieve it? And I think, where I always come at the end of the day is we focus on national issues that are very polarized, but many of our communities, even Republican communities across our country, share the same issues that we share. And the neighbors in those communities have the same problems. So what I think we need to do in Congress is really focus on what I would say is, from a policy analysis perspective, what's called self-interest policy. Let's get congressmen that may be Republicans in those districts and say, you know what? Your folks are struggling with housing as well. Your folks on these border communities are struggling from these tariff actions. Your neighbors are struggling with health care. So let's leave these other things aside at the moment, and let's figure out how we can come together on those things that we do agree with. Those things that, quite frankly, your constituents need. When I say your, I mean the Republicans that we would need to get on board and say, let's focus on those things where there is commonality. Because here's the thing, there is a tremendous amount of commonality. If you look at polling and statistics across the country, where the politicians are on the left and right is not where the majority of Americans are, regardless of whether they're Republican or Democrat. We care about the issues that affect our communities: housing, healthcare, childcare, elder care, the economy. And I think that's how we get things done. We focus on commonality.
Dylan?
There are a few things in front of Congress that I think directly affect us. In 2026, there is one of the United States' massive trade deals up for renewal. It's called the USMCA. And I think we deserve a congressman who's willing to go to Washington, that knows about fair trade, knows about how we should use tariffs, how we should strengthen small businesses and break up monopolies, to actually create a fair trade deal that puts our union workers, our small businesses, our rural communities first and foremost at the center of it. And that is what I'm fighting to do. That is someone who served as Deputy Assistant U.S. Trade Representative, someone who's held a top secret clearance, who understands that Republicans in Congress right now are trying to deregulate big monopolies and use tariffs as tools of corruption to line the pockets of the ultra wealthy. We need someone from rural communities like ours who has a seat at the table, who knows what it's like when tariffs at the northern border ended up retaliating against our farmers, ended up retaliating against our small businesses, what it meant for NAFTA to be hollowing out our towns over decades, shipping jobs abroad, and what needs to be delivered right here in the North Country. The other thing that I think I see in Congress is that we need to hold utility companies accountable right now. National Grid is a utility monopoly. They've jacked up our costs at a time where families are struggling to keep the heat on, keep food on the table. There's a bill that I would support on day one where we can't hand out, or we would ban utility monopolies like National Grid from handing out their exec bonuses when they raise their rates higher than the rate of inflation. It's a Josh Riley bill. Josh Riley, the congressman from 2 districts over. I support his bill to do that. National Grid, a multinational British corporation, shouldn't be able to keep handing out multi-millionaire bonuses to their execs while we can't keep the heat on. And I think that these are the types of issues that rural America needs to have a voice on. And right now, we don't have a seat at the table. And so I believe that you have to do that, to have that seat at the table, to be able to have that voice in Congress, to take them on by not taking corporate money at the same time. And that's what we see, the inaction time and again in Congress, is that the folks who say, oh, I'll go regulate these businesses, I'll go hold them accountable, I'll deliver for families, are taking their checks in the other hand. And we can't have that. We have to take them on, and we have to deliver for our brothers and sisters in labor, our small businesses, our farmers, and deliver lower costs right here in the North Country.
Okay. And Stuart, what do you recommend to do to help get corporate donors out of politics and maybe even ban AIPAC, the questioner asks?
Yeah, I think money is the big issue for why we can't get things done. And when I think about it, I think about how we structured our government. So the concern by the founding fathers, who had many problems, they were afraid that there would be a king. So they figured out, how can we fragment power so no one body or no one person can have it? And there's this concept called Madison's dilemma, which is, how can you create a government that has enough power to control people from affecting the common good without having so much power, the government that is, that it can't control itself? This was the dilemma. And they created a system that fragmented power both vertically and horizontally. Horizontally, we did it by creating 3 separate, equally powerful branches of government. And even within that, with the legislative branch, we fragmented power even more by having 2 houses. So we fragmented power vertically, or horizontally, but they also fragmented it vertically by separating power in a federalist system between the federal, state, and local levels. So you take this power and you spread it out, saying, this is how we prevent a king. This is how we prevent somebody from having too much power, or a body from having too much power. And they were right, but they had a blind spot. And I don't blame them completely. They didn't realize that that was the only threat that power posed to the Republic. There was another threat to come years later, which is the threat and power that corporations have in this country. It far exceeds every concern they had when they figured out, how do we separate power? How do we make sure nobody gets too much power? They didn't know this was coming. They didn't realize the amount of power that monopolies, especially media, utility companies, technology companies, how they would have so much power that far exceeds the power that they were worried that would threaten our republic. So I think we need to remember what their fear was, but realize the threat is now coming from somewhere else. And we have to regulate industries and make sure that they don't have the power that they have today.
There are so many issues. So let's dream for a moment that the big blue wave happens in the fall. Oh, please God. And how do we order these priorities? What's the first thing, Dylan? What project would you work on getting passed?
Yeah.
It is a big list. I think that money in politics has corrupted America, and that we have let Congress have too little accountability for far too long. I think we need to release the Epstein files, fully unredacted, and bring every single person to justice. But I think Congress needs an overhaul. We need to ban congressional stock trading. We need to close the revolving door between lobbyists and legislators once and for all. We need to overturn Citizens United, ban super PACs and corporate PACs. We need to lower contribution limits. I dream of a day where New York's public finance elections is a model for the country, where we build a democracy that is powered on grassroots money rather than big money. I believe that we need to break up big monopolies. We need a bill that fully restructures our economy to make sure that it works for working people. A lot of people will say, oh, Washington's broken, the economy's broken. No, it is acting in the way it was designed to act. It is rigged. It is rigged against small businesses and working families. It's rigged against those who haven't had a voice for far too long. And we need someone to go to Washington with a spine, to build a better America that's possible. We can't just go back to what was once, normalcy or business as usual. Business as usual won't cut it anymore. We have too many people in Washington that have been entrenched in their power for far too long. And we need to rebuild our democracy that says that folks like us, folks in rural America, every single one of you here today, that you can chip in $5 or $10, have a voice, and show up to the ballot box, and yet your voice actually matters. That we aren't silenced by big corporations or armies of lobbyists that keep rewriting the rules in their favor. That we have a democracy that is representative of us. And that starts by fully taking on the corruption and the pay-to-play politics of Washington and ending it once and for all.
Yeah. I agree that all of those things are hugely important and need to be priorities. But I think the question in terms of what I would want to focus on first is pretty simple. Before we do any of those things, we need to restore American ideals and American values here at home and around the world. That has to be first and fundamental. This is the reason I got in the race. I said this can't happen in America. It is. This has to change first, because nothing else is going to happen if that continues. So that would be my primary goal.
Okay. It appears likely that the president will attempt to interfere with the election that we were just talking about to elect public officials. What do you think should be done to protect the election process and voting areas and ballots? Dylan?
Man,
Which of course you won't have any, elected officials won't have any control over that at that point,
Yeah.
because you're not elected yet. Even
our attorneys.
legitimately, you can't do anything about it.
Huh? We should ask him sometime.
Yeah.
Um,
Don't hold your breath.
I think that our attorneys general across the country have a big role to play in protecting our elections in the upcoming cycle. That we're lucky in New York to have leadership that is willing to go to bat for us and protect everyone's right to vote here. But I do think that we need to have leaders across the country stand up and vocally use the bully pulpit to fight every single moment to say that this is not normal. We need a Democratic leadership, frankly, in Congress that uses every tool in front of them to block the SAVE Act, to say that we shouldn't be rolling back voting rights in our country, to actually protect someone's right to vote in the Voting Rights Act. We need leadership in the House, in the Democratic caucus that holds the line and doesn't cave on these issues time and again. And so I hope and I call upon every Democrat in Congress to actually show up and stop normalizing this behavior, to use the bully pulpit at every single moment, to say that our elections are under attack, that democracy is undermined every single time that this administration tries to consolidate power. Whether it's the power of one man trying to influence tariffs, the one man who tries to influence the outcome of a stock market, the one man who says that we should blow up the filibuster to pass the SAVE Act. This is not normal. And we need to be able to have a Democratic Party that is an opposition party in this moment to fight back and end that corruption.
Stuart?
Yes, this is an existential issue for us. This would be the end of our democracy if he were to control the election system. He is not doing it out of a thought that this is creating a more secure, just election system. We know what his thought is. We know it. He's told us, he's shown us. So if he were to control the election process, that would be it. We cannot allow that to happen. Whatever we need to do, we need to make sure that happens. We obviously never can allow anything that disenfranchises any group of people in America. This is by definition what a democracy is. If it disenfranchises people, by definition it can't be considered a democracy these days. That can't happen. But we also know something else, that it is not an issue. We know that voter fraud is not a problem we have in this country. We have a lot of issues. This is not one of them. So why is he making it one? Well, we know why. So we need to do everything that we can, using the courts, everything we can to ensure that that never happens. Because once we lose that power, what's left is too difficult to think about.
Yeah. That is sad but true.
Yes.
So it takes little groups like this, multiplied many times throughout the state, the region, the country, and it appears that there's a lot of people that have been mobilized, that have been activated to protect our country. We have to pray that it continues to go that way and enough good people step up and help save our country. That's the real SAVE Act right there.
Yes. That's
Is getting off your couch. Share that.
Vote for John.
No.
Got your petitions?
No. But speaking of candidates and running for office, would you support the person who wins New York 21 even if it's not you?
Of course.
Yeah,
Stuart?
absolutely.
Absolutely. You'd be willing to help out?
Yes, absolutely. That's the bigger issue. We have to win. So yeah.
Yeah, get everybody, all hands on deck. We got to be there. Some of the buzzwords today, AI and data centers that have become primary concerns for a lot of folks. Questioner says, can you give us some thoughts on that issue? That is also overlaps with electricity costs that are skyrocketing. I mean, who should pay for that? I don't like, the data centers should spend a few of their billions, right, Dylan?
Let's go. Okay, I got a lot of thoughts about this.
Oh, here we go.
In the last 24 hours under this administration, we saw a framework out of the White House around what they think AI should be and how it should be unregulated for the next decade. This administration is putting forward what is called a preemption clause that they want to be permanent that would ban states from acting on AI for a decade. In New York, we have what's called the RAISE Act. It was one of the first in the nation safety and security protocols passed by a state legislature that would ask large AI companies to have protocols in place should their learning machine go rogue or should it not turn off when it needs to. That they weren't designed to inflict massive physical or monetary damage. But Donald Trump says that those laws shouldn't happen, that there shouldn't be any state regulations passed because they know best. And what they know is that they are caving to big AI CEOs over and over again at the expense of consumers and workers and families and journalists, and the list go on. I believe that we need to fight against this framework and actually have a real safety and security protocol in place for artificial intelligence. There's a lot of promise when it comes to AI, but I also think there's a lot of peril for what the future holds for our families in rural America, especially for our workers. A place like us that was hollowed out by NAFTA, think about AI and what that could do for rural America again. There's promise in that, but there's also peril if we don't show up for our brothers and sisters in labor, for our small businesses that are left behind and left out of the process when CEOs make a buck on our backs over and over again. And so that brings me to a data center expansion in Messina. I was the only one there to publicly oppose it, where a big company comes in, strong arms town boards into changing zoning regulations to expand data centers. We're seeing it happen over and over in America, especially in rural America, where companies come in and they say it's our way or the highway. And these AI companies are exerting their muscle in elections. Down in New York City, they're spending tens of millions of dollars just to kill someone's campaign that they disagree with. This is all intertwined right now. And what we pay is our freedom. We pay higher costs when they come in and they take water and electricity. Our electricity rates are going to go up. I've got grave concerns about the data center expansion on the St. Lawrence River, what that means for the Akwesasne people on the reservation downstream. There is examples across the country where data centers have come in and they've poisoned our wells and our soil with PFAS, forever chemicals, things that we already know exist here in the Adirondacks, a problem that we've dealt with for decades. It's only going to get worse. And then our jobs are going to disappear as well. There's also an element of this where I think a learning machine, AI, shouldn't have the capability to tell a child to go harm themselves, to tell someone to inflict physical damage or to inflict financial damage. We have to protect children's safety in AI in a way that we let social media go unregulated for decades. We know what the results of that, the consequences of that have been. And so that brings me back to where I started, that the idea that this administration says we should let AI go untouched. It has changed within the last 5 minutes. The time we've been here, AI has already been expanding and exponentially more advanced than it was before we all sat down. So think about that for a second. Think about what it could be, what it would be if we let it go unregulated for the next 10 years. The final thing I'll have to say, and he's not here to answer for it, but I think AI should be banned in political ads and in our election. And I say this for a very particular reason. Blake Gendebine used artificial intelligence in one of his ads to depict Elise Stefanik doing things that she's never done.
There is a fine line between manipulation and misinformation in our democracy, and I believe that that should be held accountable. He has never answered for it. He's never answered who he even voted for. But to use AI in our election, right here in New York 21, it is a small step from that into what this administration views as what could be done with AI to manipulate our election and voters in the years to come. And so that is why I will fight tooth and nail to stand up to these data centers, what they've jacked up our costs already, but particularly the freedoms that they're trying to extract from us. We deserve a voice in that process.
Yeah, it's a complicated one. I think this is just another example of businesses with too much power, too much money, and a failure of Washington to regulate them. They absolutely have to be regulated. However, I don't think you want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. There needs to be regulation, but there is incredible potential as well. When we create the regulation, we need to make sure that we understand what the dangers are for children and for others, as Dylan said. We have to understand, are there other market failures that exist where what they're doing is creating unintended consequences for other neighbors, whether it is forever chemicals, whether it is a fire that they can't put out at a data center because the fire department in that area doesn't know how to deal with it. These are the questions for these data centers that they're looking at building. So we have to make sure that regulations take those things into consideration so that everybody's protected. However, there is also incredible potential with AI. And before I talk a little bit about that, even if we were to decide, you know what, we're going to shut down AI, guess what? We are not the only ones advancing AI and putting money into development of AI. Other countries are, including our enemies. China probably arguably leads us in AI technology. So us just putting it on the shelf isn't a realistic solution. But leaving that aside, there are reasons that AI should be looked at and embraced to some degree with the proper regulation. So one of the benefits, there's not too many, but one of the benefits of running for Congress is that I try to attend events so I can learn about issues. A week and a half ago, I went to a housing forum that Adirondack Community Foundation put on in Screw Lake. I went there as a neighbor, not as a candidate, just to listen. And I listened to 5 panelists that all work for nonprofits that are working to fix the housing problem in our areas. Yesterday, or 2 days ago, whenever, I can't remember, I went to another forum on AI. And it was about how can nonprofits and small businesses utilize AI to assist in their efforts. I went there again as a neighbor, not a politician. I wanted to learn. What are the actual issues that we're facing and what are people suggesting? I will tell you, I learned an incredible amount about AI. I had no idea it could do the things that it could do. And the nonprofits were talking about how it helps them with grant writing. They said, listen, we haven't fired people with by the use of AI. We've actually had the same amount of people, but they're able to get more done. Because they can take a grant, writing a grant, which is incredibly time intensive, and they still write the grant, but they're able to have AI look at 1,000 other grants on the same issue across the country and see where the commonalities were in terms of the ones that were approved. And they said this has greatly increased their approval rate for grants. So our communities, our nonprofits are embracing this technology. I had no idea. Then I learned, they said, well, the climate issues. And absolutely, the climate issues have to be dealt with. This is what I talk about market failures. If there's pollution, I don't care if you're an AI company or a power plant. If you create the pollution, you need to be responsible for cleaning it up. Again, AI, utility, whatever. That has to be built in. That's the market failure. However, I also learned that while image and video generation of AI is energy intensive, that text creation in AI, saying, hey, asking a question, can you create something, is about the same energy use as a Google search. So for all those that do go to Google, you are doing the exact same as somebody who uses AI to create text. Again, that was new to me. So I think we absolutely need to create regulation to understand the issues. And here's the other thing. I don't think we know where the issues are yet. This is the thing about emerging technology. We're beginning to see where they are, but that could shift. There could be a whole new issue that AI creates. So we have to make sure that we are on top of it, we're looking at it, and we're regulating it, and we're making sure that those in power in the industry can't use their power and money to influence our decisions. But within that framework, I think we need to let this technology be developed.
This voter writes, I do not approve of our attack on Iran. How do we undo the damage done to the U.S. reputation of being Israel's lapdog? Ouch. Yeah, go ahead.
What's happening in Gaza is a genocide. And I think that we need to finally acknowledge that and hold our allies and ourselves accountable for the role that we have played in that. I believe that we need to end AIPAC's influence on our elections. What we saw just recently last week in Illinois, what we've seen already happening in New York elections. Blake Gendebine took a check from an AIPAC board member but isn't here to answer for it. And we need to have an arms embargo on Israel. The next Congress, the next Democratic majority in Congress should fight to make sure that there is condition on foreign aid to Israel. And when it comes to Iran, we cannot vote or approve one more dime for this war. A vote to fund this war is a vote for this war. And anyone who votes for it, frankly, should lose their seat. I will go to Congress and I will fight against the foreign influence in our election. I will fight to keep your tax dollars here at home in our schools, in our hospitals, in our children. Enough with approving more bombs to send overseas to bomb schools and hospitals. They're robbing from ours just to do more damage and death and destruction abroad, because this corrupt administration only cares about its billionaire buddies and the oil execs that make a buck or two off the backs of working people here in the North Country. And we pay with our freedom, we pay with higher costs, and we pay with our lives, because disproportionately rural families are the ones that serve in our military. And this administration fails to acknowledge that. When the elites choose war, they aren't the ones who fight it, and they aren't the ones who pay the price. You and I are. Gas prices on our drive up here, they went from $3.75 down in Glens Falls to $4.29 down the street, and it's only going up. They're robbing us of our health care to send bombs across the ocean just to bomb schools and hospitals abroad, and it is time that we end that corruption and keep your tax dollars here at home.
Dylan, I don't know if you saw the State of the Union, but apparently gas prices are under $2. I mean, that's what I heard. So I got to find out where that is. So yeah, another incredibly complicated question. I think when you said what would we want to focus on first, and I talked about restoring American ideals and values, and I said here and abroad. And I think that concept applies here as well. We have undermined and destroyed our alliances and our allies and our international relationships. That is a force multiplier in security. Those relationships, quite frankly, are what prevent us and other countries from having to use force, because they recognize that the world community stands behind a particular decision. That's why it's a force multiplier. We know what's happened in terms of those relationships. We've seen what the Prime Minister said when he was in Zurich, saying, hey, we can't rely on America anymore. They are no longer part of the world order. So that happens for a number of reasons. Venezuela, Greenland, and again, Iran. It is the same thing. So we need to rebuild those relationships, because it's from that perspective that you're able to deal with countries like Iran. Because this is why I said it's complex. Let me also be clear about something. The regime is our enemy. They are an enemy to our allies. They are an enemy to the Iranian people. They are an enemy to peace. It is very hard to look at the regime's actions and come to a different conclusion. However, the solution to confronting an enemy like Iran is not what we saw. It was not the reckless acts that we saw this administration take. Yes, Iran needed to be confronted. And they needed to be confronted by a world order with alliances and allegiances that could stand up and say, no, we are not going to allow you to slaughter people. We are not going to allow you to work with Syria and undermine their fragile government. We're not going to allow you to work with Yemen as a proxy and launch attacks on Americans and our allies. We're not going to allow you to create and arm militias in Iraq to undermine that administration. There is a difference between opposed to America and being an enemy to America. Opposition means you don't agree with what we are. An enemy is somebody who is actively working against our interests, our troops, and threatening them. And Iran is doing that. But what we saw was a reckless act that is undermining the national economy, gas prices, further eroding our international relationships. And this is what we have to fix. We have to rebuild those relationships, because here's the other thing. Iran is not going to be the last issue we face. They will not be our last enemy. So imagine, take this to the next step. China, you could probably make an argument that we have some interests not aligned with them. Imagine if we wanted to confront that enemy the way that we're confronting Iran. Or if we wanted to confront Russia the way that he is confronting Iran. Can you imagine what would happen then? But we are leaving ourselves with no other option, because we have no friends left. So we have to rebuild those alliances. So when these issues happen, whether it's Iran, whether it's Russia, whether it's China, we can stand together and say, no, we don't accept this world order. Thank you.
At least we sold our ships that could pull up mines.
Yes, and I guess oil prices will go down because we just released the sanctions on Iranian oil today. Do you realize that? I read this, and I was like, oh my goodness, so we're bombing you. And then he says today, you know what, we're going to release sanctions on Iranian oil that the Iranian government is going to get for so. I mean, we talk about recklessness and having no plan. I mean, yeah.
The minesweeper did it for me, but it took me a while.
Yes.
To get there. Any follow-up, Dylan? Give you a chance, if you needed to say anything else about that. But you talked about, Stuart, the relationships in the world that the question from the voter calls it seriously wounded. Maybe it's worse than that. Do you think these relationships can be salvaged? And
Yes.
how would you use diplomacy to reestablish? I mean, I think just by the changing of the guard might go a long way to make world leaders feel a little better.
Yes.
But what else?
Yes. I mean, without actually maybe saying the words, maybe you do say it in private, we have to ask for forgiveness. That's what we need to do. And I think we do that more so with our actions than with our words. When we talk about a changing of the guard is what needs to happen, yes. That's what we need to do. And that is how we say we're sorry. Because here's the thing. Trump didn't steal this election. We put him in power. By we, I mean the collective we, not those in this room. The collective we put him in power. So if we put somebody else in power, somebody that supports what we believe, that is how we show the world that we do care about them and we do care about the relationships, and that is how we say we are sorry that we did this to you. I mean, we've done it with so many nations, but in the North Country alone, what we did to Canada is disgusting. Like, it is, not only is it undermining our economy, screw that. Economy's important, but there is something more fundamental, which is the relationship we had with an ally and a neighbor. And here's the thing, if you want to have a trade policy dispute, sure, you can meet, we can have Dylan there, they can have a negotiation about trade policy. What you don't do is say, you know what, you're a failed nation. Hey, Prime Minister, we're going to call you governor, and you're now the 51st state. That's what you don't do, because that's no longer having trade discussions. That is insulting. I mean, there is no wonder why we're down 35% across the border from Canadians going to the U.S. I love going to Canada. I'm embarrassed. I am embarrassed when I go and I check in at the hotel, which is ridiculous. That as an American, we should be embarrassed to go to a neighbor. But I am. We have to fix all these relationships. I do think it can be done, and I think it starts by us saying we're sorry, which is the ballot.
All right, Dylan? How about it?
I do think that they can be repaired, but I don't think they can be repaired if we don't lead by example right here at home. And we expect other nations around the world to follow America's example, to uphold ideas around democracy, around our economy, what our communities look like. When we have an administration that hands out access to the White House because someone donated tens of millions of dollars to build a ballroom. Or we have a Republican Party that's trying to disenfranchise millions of women with the SAVE Act. American imperialism should end. It should end when Donald Trump ends his term. And we cannot march into Venezuela or Cuba or Iran and expect to be listened to when we wield our power in a way that says we know best and only we can fix the world order, because we don't have our own house in order. I fundamentally think that repairing the world and the crises we see across the Middle East, across South America, how the United States leads the globe once again means that we need to protect our own democracy right here at home and give our families, our small businesses, a fighting chance. Because we cannot expect anyone else to listen to us when we don't follow those same marching orders right here from Washington all the way to the North Country. It's as simple as that for me. You know, foreign policy is really complex, but it really boils down to that for me. How can we be seen as a leader in the world when we don't even have our own democracy in our own house in order?
Stuart, if you are elected, what House committees would you want to be a part of? Would you focus on one or several? Where would your talents best be served in the House? Keeping in mind that perhaps if there
Ways and Means would be, but I don't know that that's realistic, right? So you have to be feasible.
Junior guy.
What? Yeah.
You'd be the junior guy.
Well, correct. I don't think that's right. I would say healthcare would probably be the one that I would have most interest in, because I think that is really the existential issue that we're facing right now is with healthcare, and I would like to be a part of that solution. I think it's incredibly complex. I mean, it was Truman back in '45 that really wanted to try to find a solution for healthcare, and he couldn't do it. I think it was in 65, I don't remember the year, that Johnson was able to pass Medicare and Medicaid, and Truman was there for that signing. But we haven't achieved much else since then. So we got Obamacare, which was fantastic, and that is still lives on a razor's edge. So when you look at, almost 80 years of trying to deal with an issue that is so important, I mean, how important? Our lives. Not metaphorical lives, literal lives. And in 80 years, we haven't been able to move very far in terms of where we started. So I want to see that end. I think if we made accomplishments in that area, it would be a massive step forward. And I think, what does it mean to have accomplishments? It means every single person covered in the United States, period. There's multiple ways to get there, but that's it. Every single person has health insurance. If they need a doctor, they will find a doctor. If they need care, they will get care. I mean, it is ridiculous that among wealthy nations, which I think at the moment we're still considered, but I don't know, that this is the state that we live in. So I would say that, if I had my choice, would be where I would want to be.
Dylan?
Okay, I mean, answer this question in two ways. A junior member in Congress doesn't get full say in what committees they go on. So I want to be realistic, but I'm going to say, as someone who has served in the White House and has worked on trade issues, as I said earlier, the USMCA is in front of Congress, and that will go through the Ways and Means Committee. We need someone from rural America, from our district, to have a seat at the table when it comes to negotiating America's biggest trade deal that is up for renewal, to make sure that our union workers have protections that Republicans are trying to undermine every single day, that big corporations and billionaires are influencing Congress to make sure that we strike out provisions of the USMCA that will protect wage protections and collective bargaining rights. I want to be able to be that voice for rural America, for New York 21 in those negotiations. We also need to have someone who has a strong understanding of our tax code. I've spent years as a senior advisor to a national economic nonprofit where I've worked with legislators on the Hill to restructure our tax code, to close loopholes for corporations and billionaires, and to expand tax credits for working families. Something that I fundamentally believe in and think is a policy that we don't talk about enough is the child tax credit. Something that we can expand for families to give them $300 every month for every child that they have, that offsets rising costs. We did it in 2021 under the American Rescue Plan. What we saw was that children went to school with full bellies, that mental health outcomes and learning outcomes from schools were higher. Nonpartisan studies showed that for every $1 that we invested in our kids, $10 went back into rural local economies like ours. That is a 900% return on investment, and every single Republican killed it. We need to have a fighter to go back to the Ways and Means Committee to fight in the next reconciliation bill that will put forward expanded tax credits for low-income workers and our families. That is something that I fundamentally think that we need to have representation in Congress on. I also think that at a time where tariffs have resulted in retaliation against agricultural communities across our country, we need to have a voice on the Agriculture Committee in Congress, where we've seen that tariffs at the northern border, tariffs against China, resulted in soybean farmers in our country losing business, cattle ranchers in our country losing business. You know, there's someone who talks a lot about dairy farming in our district, but there's also soybean and cattle ranchers in our district too. And we need to make sure that we are fighting for every single farmer, family farmers, to make sure that they stand up to big agricultural companies, and that we actually will give our farmers trade access and not just relief. We need a member to be on foreign affairs, to have a voice for our military base here in our district, to have a voice in foreign conflicts that this administration entangles us in. We need to have a voice on things like energy and commerce, where K Street and lobbyists try to come in and dictate exactly what happens in the economy. And I hope I will go to Congress and fight every single day to get onto those types of committees. And I think that it's realistic that a junior member probably gets onto one of them. But you don't really have your pick often. And so I think that I have some clear priorities about what our district needs. And that means that you go in and fight for all of those and that you land on one of them so that we have real representation in Congress. And on the ones that you don't land on, you have allies in that fight with you. You know, I was endorsed by Congressman Ro Khanna, the leader behind the Epstein files, the release of the Epstein files. Ro leads a subcommittee, a special committee on China. We need to have allies in every single part of Congress to make sure that they represent our needs in our district just as well as we can. That rural America isn't squeezed out time and again, because right now, frankly, it is. We are left out, and folks do not represent us in these committees, do not represent our voice, and we need someone who's going to build those relationships, who already has those relationships, and will fight against the interests that keep trying to tell us to settle for less.
You're referencing this as an agricultural district, which it certainly is. There are policies that support all types of farmers and the broader ag economy, trade, as you referenced, and subsidies, labor. But you mentioned, Stuart, that you had a brush with, what was it, an H-2B non-ag visa holding person, somebody who was here legally, a guest worker, right? So there's a lot of guest workers that have been absconded from farms across the district as well. How do we address that, and how do we get back to some form of normalcy as it results to immigration? Because I don't think any of us fear the enemy coming over the northern border here, just about 40 miles north of here, but how do we reset the table there?
Yeah, so in terms of immigration, that was immigration question, or?
Yeah, and particularly for the ag industry.
Oh,
in our
okay.
country.
Well, yeah, I think we have to, I think fixing it for the agriculture industry is gonna have the same effect as fixing it for other industries, because they're all suffering. I know within the hospitality industry, we need a strong workforce. Certainly so does the agricultural industry. I mean, we talked about monopolies. I didn't talk about agriculture, but certainly agricultural monopolies are just as impactful and dangerous right now as technology and as utility. And they are forcing out the small farmers. And this is not just a food sustainability issue, it's a national security issue if we can't provide the food. But small farmers have the highest rate of bankruptcy of everybody. In fact, it is so hard for small farmers right now. I heard of one that ended up having to run for Congress. It got so bad. So these are things that we need to work on and things that we need to fix. But the thing with immigration is, as I think you said in the opening remarks when you were referencing some of my notes, this is not the fault of Republicans. This is the fault of everybody. Democrats, Republicans, for decades have failed to fix the immigration system. And this is why we are where we are at. So what we need to do is finally step up and fix it. And we, as a country, are to blame. We allowed these people to live in our communities, including undocumented people. We allowed them to live because our government, our politicians, including our businesses, knew that they were integral to our communities. They were necessary for our societies to thrive, our communities to thrive, but they didn't have the political will to do what was necessary to actually make them legal. They couldn't say, we're going to create a pathway to legalization. Amnesty, you're saying. The third rail. They couldn't say it. So instead we avoided the topic. We said, you know what? We're not going to go after enforcement. We're going to let them be here. We're going to let them stay. Because we need them. If we don't, our economies will crumble. Our communities will crumble. But we don't have the spine to step up and deal with it. And this is why we are where we're at today with the immigration issues. So we have to solve that. We absolutely must create a pathway to legalization for those that are here. Now, how do we get that done? I will say, which is probably not very popular, and I could have just stopped there, but that is not fair to our democracy, and it's not fair for this debate. We need strong borders too. That has to happen. And I think that's how you get it done. When you say, listen, we want a pathway to legalization, and at the same time, we will create secure borders. We will make sure that those that are crossing into this country, we know who they are. We make sure that there is no drug trafficking, human trafficking, these issues. That's how you get it done. But we have to deal with it. Because at the end of the day, our economies are strengthened by immigrants. You know, when I've gone through this process, I like to write a lot of my remarks, probably too much, as JJ once told me. Don't go with the iPad, just speak extemporaneously.
Speaking up constantly.
Well, you're right in front of me. But I think about the words that this administration uses in terms of America first and greatness. And it angers me because he's appropriated these words to mean what he thinks they mean. He changes the definition. And it is so, it fills me with righteous anger. Because, fine, talk about greatness. It's not how you define greatness. Talk about America first. Do you know what America first is? Immigrants. Don't say America first is contrary to immigration. They work together in synthesis. They are our strength. If you want an American first policy, then you have an immigration policy that is smart and makes sense and supports our communities. So I think this is how we have to approach it. And that will not only help the agriculture industries, it will help every industry.
How do we fix that immigration so that there's enough farm workers and guest workers in the country?
Yeah, so I want to be clear. There was a bipartisan immigration bill in front of Congress in 2024. And it didn't get passed because of one person, Donald Trump. He called around the Republican caucus and said, kill the bill and don't give the Democrats a win before the election. Why? Because he knew on the other side that he could help his billionaire buddies like Peter Thiel and Palantir enrich themselves on the backs of immigrants and surveil us and take our freedoms away as they build out their detention centers. A few months ago, actually about a month ago, a few weeks ago, I asked for a debate in this race. And Stewart agreed to one. But the person who's not here, Blake Jedabine, he didn't. He said the debates in this primary were unnecessary. In fact, he said that if I was looking for a crowd, I should just go to his event instead. There's a crowd here right now. And you all deserve to see all three of us here sitting behind this table because there are clear differences when it comes to immigration between Blake, Stewart, and me. Blake said that he believes we should be hiring more ICE agents. I fundamentally disagree. We should not be handing out $50,000 signing bonuses to more ICE agents when apparently there's not enough money to keep our hospitals open or give our teachers a raise. We shouldn't be sending more masked agents into our streets to terrorize our communities and rip our families apart. We shouldn't be building another detention facility in Plattsburgh or entering an agreement between local law enforcement in St. Lawrence and ICE. You know, I give Stewart a lot of credit because we drove to St. Lawrence. It was a 3-hour drive for me. I'm sure it wasn't all that much less for him. We were 10 minutes down the street from Lisbon, 10 minutes down the street from Blake's farm. And he didn't show up to oppose a local agreement between the St. Lawrence County Legislature and ICE. I haven't heard him say anything about it. In fact, I've only heard him say that he believes that we should hire more ICE agents. And so if he doesn't believe that anymore, I think he should be right here next to me. And you should hear him say that.
Amen.
When it comes to visas, when it comes to an immigration system, we need to backfill the number of justices in the judicial branch that have been fired by this administration to create efficiency and quality in our courts, to process asylum cases, to get folks who have been waiting decades through this process. We need to have a legal pathway to citizenship. There are so many of our families that are immigrant families in our communities that have paid paid their taxes, have been productive members of our society. And many of them have American children that are born here. In fact, many of them are mixed status households that hold what is called an individual tax identification number, an ITIN, instead of a social security number. And this administration has singled out their children, American children. When I talked a little bit earlier about the child tax credit, about tax credits for working families, Republicans in Congress have decided that immigrant families, when someone might be a mixed status family, those American children don't deserve those tax credits. That we should actually take away benefits from working families when someone in their family is not an American citizen, when they're a mixed status household, even though they have US born children, American children. We need to make sure that the visa process is streamlined so that folks are able to have that pathway to citizenship. And like Stuart said, it has great implications beyond agriculture. It has implications on our medical industry, our hospitals. I have met countless people who have told me that their doctors were immigrants. And then after a year, their doctor left. And they got a new one. And then after a year, their doctor left. And they got a new one. And it's unsustainable. It's unsustainable to have a rural district like ours left out and squeezed out by this administration. That they don't think about what these consequences are when they attack our neighbors, our loved ones in our communities. And we are left to pick up the pieces. It's outrageous. It's outrageous to me. It makes me sick to my stomach that in this district, when we have been told by 15 people that there's one candidate in this race that we should support, at a time when American citizens have been killed in the streets by a paramilitary force, that he can't be bothered to show up or debate, it makes me sick. And frankly, I find it disqualifying.
He'll be able to listen to this, though.
Yeah, there you go.
Voter's question, I am concerned about climate change. The U.S. has exited the Paris Climate Accord. With this exit, the U.S. is the only country in the world to have abandoned the international commitment to slow global warming. As a member of the U.S. House, what could you do, Stuart, to slow global warming?
It's a little bit. On day one, I'll solve it. You said we exited the Paris Accords. We did that twice. So we did it Trump 1.0, and then obviously Trump, then Biden brought us back in, and Trump took us back out. And it's not only the Paris Accords, we also removed ourselves from the United Nations Committee on Climate Change. And here's the thing, the Paris Accord, sure, that was a commitment. Being on the United Nations Committee enabled us to have a say and have an impact. But we are no longer at the table. These decisions are now being made without a U.S. representative at the UN Committee for Climate Change. So, that tells you where his priorities are. And we have to fix climate change. And I don't want to get too academic, but we have to do it from a legislative perspective. We can't do it from executive order because it's not durable policy. One president comes in, I'm out of this accord. Next president, I'm in. Guy comes back, I'm out. Guess what? Climate change isn't going to be fixed that way. It is going to take decades to lower greenhouse gases. It is going to take a consistent effort. And that is only going to happen through congressional act. That is the only way it'll be, has the potential of being more durable and actually has a chance of achieving the results we want. I do think we need to re-enter the Paris Accords, obviously, and I think we need to be committed to that. And at the same time, we need to make sure that we balance energy needs with climate goals. So about 9% of energy comes from renewable sources in the United States, 9%. So obviously we can't get rid of fossil fuels right now. Not only would it be cost prohibitive, we would have blackouts. It couldn't happen when 9% of your energy at this point comes from renewables. Now, it was at 5% a decade ago. So we're making progress. We are investing more, and we need to continue to invest more. But this is one of those areas where I opened and I said, sometimes the answer is not, doesn't come from Washington. If you look at climate policy, and again, I don't want to get too academic about this, but from an impact, it is the state and regional efforts that have had the most impact in the United States on climate change, because the federal government can't make a commitment. So the Northeast has a regional initiative to limit greenhouse gases among power plants. I think it has 11 states that have committed to this. We obviously know about California. California has an agreement with Canada, and there's a whole Northwest, including Washington and Oregon, that have joined with California. So there's actually more impact on climate change policy being done at the regional and state level. But guess what? This administration is trying to stop regional and state efforts, saying this is federal prerogative. Federal prerogative should supersede California or another state setting CAFE standards or fuel standards for transportation. So not only is more impact happening on the state level, but this administration is even trying to stop it. So we do need to do all these things. We need to recommit to Paris Climate Accords. We need to have legislative action, but then we also need to allow states to do what, and regional coalitions of states, to do what the federal government has failed to do for so long. When we see something that's working, we should encourage that. So I'm not saying there shouldn't be federal regulations as well, but we should be supporting states that say, you know what, we are going to set our own standard in terms of those businesses and those power plants that are within our borders. So I think that's how effective climate change policy is going to happen. Yeah, okay.
Thank you. Dylan?
I think that we have the privilege of living in a beautiful place like the Adirondacks, and a responsibility to protect it with every bone in our body and go down fighting against anything that threatens it. I look around and I see corporate polluters that have come into our community, like biochar down in Saratoga County, or GE over in Washington County. Folks that have poisoned our water with PFAS and forever chemicals up the Hudson for, I think, what's felt like my entire life, that we've dealt with the Hudson getting dredged over and over again. I know that families in Plattsburgh and St. Lawrence have dealt with similar issues. And there's been little to no accountability in that. We need to protect our environment from the rise of salt on the roads when it comes to our winter months that have changed the pHs of our rivers and our lakes, that has invited in invasive species into our environment. And then when it comes to the change in our climate, we need to hold polluters accountable for what role they have played in climate change. I believe that we should be investing in clean energy and good, strong union jobs that can't be shipped abroad. It is a way that we can expand 1,000 new trade schools across America to bring people back into the building trades, to set folks up in rural communities when they exit high school to have a pathway to higher education or vocational training or starting their own business. That we need to invest in clean energy like wind and solar and hydro. But we can't do that at the expense of our conservation goals as well. There's a project that's happening down in Fort Edward that I oppose. It's a land grab from wildlife refuge where endangered species exist in Fort Edward. And the state's moving forward with a project that takes that wildlife refuge away at the expense of a solar farm. I ask you to reimagine something with me. What could our vacant malls or our vacant storefronts be if we took pavement of unused parking lots and created solar panels on them? Or malls where there are rooftops that are vacant right now, where we can put solar panels on those. there's so much more that we should be prioritizing when it comes to clean energy rather than taking away from farmland and agricultural land here in the North Country. And so I ask that when we fight in Congress to make sure that we are prioritizing those sort of projects over any project that takes away from conservation goals here in the North Country as well.
Good answer. We have a few more minutes for questions. Is there anyone that would like to ask one?
Just because it was right out, we just talked about green energy. So my mother and I were talking right beforehand, and I'm going to ask a question for you because I think it's a big one. So Governor Hochul's push for green energy initiatives, you know, a lot of the propaganda and rhetoric that the Republican side uses is that, you know, we're all going to be banned from using certain stoves and we're all going to be forced to drive certain cars. And can you give some insight to the feasibility of such things? And then A, if that's even true based off of what you know, and B, like you're talking about more practical ways of using green energy, so that when we're having these conversations with people on the other side, per se, and they say these things, we have something to say back that's like reasonable.
So the governor's pushing for a nuclear power plant in the state that I'm not quite there yet. And I want to say why, because I think that we have to ask ourselves who wins and who loses in that. And we've talked a little bit about the expansion of data centers and using our electricity and our water and what that means for costs going up. One of the reasons that nuclear energy is being pushed right now from industry is that at the expense of draining us of electricity and water, nuclear seems to be the only thing that's left to power the expansion of data centers. And so I'm not there because I think that pushing forward a nuclear power plant and nuclear energy right now actually makes the data centers the winners in this conversation and working families like ours much more of the losers. On clean energy in our state, I think that we have had years to prepare for a modern grid, as has been asked of us through the state legislature, and National Grid failed to do so. And so I think that Albany's responsibility is to hold utility monopolies accountable for not modernizing the grid and instead, years after legislation was passed, to jack up our costs instead. I think that we have a responsibility as a congressperson to go to Washington and fight against those utility monopolies, to break up exclusive service territories and actually make National Grid compete on quality of service rather than just an exclusive service territory. And so I look to see what's happening in the state legislature. You know, the budget is supposedly due by April 1st, and they often fail to do so. So I'll look over the next few weeks of what's happening in Albany, but I ask anyone who serves us in Washington or in Albany that they're fighting to make sure that utility monopolies don't get away with jacking up our costs while failing to modernize our grid, to failing their own responsibility in this process to helping us reach those climate goals. And instead, working families like ours have been saddled with the extra costs, and I think that's wrong.
Stuart?
I think data centers, you mentioned data centers, they're an issue, but I think our energy consumption is driven by a lot more than just data centers, and it is going to be an issue regardless of what we do with data centers. And let's be clear, we're not going to get rid of data centers unless all of us agree to stop using Google, all of us stop using Amazon. They are going to exist. So they're a part of our energy demand. So, you know, I think we have to make sure we don't let good be the enemy of great. I would love 100% sustainable energy. I'd love it. That would be great. Not possible at the moment. You know, we have to work for it. We have to continue to invest in it, but we could not shut down fossil fuels tomorrow and still have lights on or have heat on. We have to recognize that reality. So the question is, how do we plan to get there? What is the plan to be a more climate-friendly country? And in the meantime, how do we solve it? And I am in favor of nuclear. I believe when we look at what the options are right now, this is the better of the options we're facing in terms of access to energy, because we need it. We know we need it. The reason we're talking about it right now is because it's very politically sensitive. Why? Because has anybody checked the utility bill? It's ridiculous. It is ridiculous. And yes, there is an issue in terms of utility monopolies and distribution pricing, but a lot of the price is also being driven by supply issues. We need more supply, and that is only going to get worse. And I think nuclear is a way that we can do that. I think that we do need to invest in green solutions, but we have to look at that as a realistic possibility. Now, in terms of your actual question about the housing and the natural gas, there was a bill that they were looking at to say that all new construction couldn't have gas hookup, and that's true. They were saying that they weren't going to go backwards and retrofit, but permitting for new buildings in New York, you couldn't have gas. That would.
Or fossil fuels. No oil, no coal.
Well, right, great. Yeah, exactly. Well,
you could have wood, I guess.
well,
but-
right. I mean, you have to be careful with the fossil fuels. Like, you couldn't hook up the gas, but to be honest, the electric is being powered by fossil fuels, right? So we recognize coal is going down in terms of energy usage, and in terms of how energy has been created, but that's because coal has become less economical for power companies. So we look at natural gas and that's what they're utilizing because it's more profitable at the moment. But yeah, the bill was to cut that off so you could only use electricity. That there's some problems with that. But, which is what they're saying. The other side is saying we don't think.
Well, when we can't speak to it, which seems to be the
Well,
issue
correct.
here.
And it's true that that's what she was calling for, that no gas hookups.
And our buses, you hear that school buses have to be, and so these are the talking points
Right.
that I struggle with, because if I can't speak to why that would even be feasible when people can't afford to even buy a 20-year-old vehicle to get to work.
Yeah.
So that goes back to the cost of these green energy, in my mind, the cost of the buses or the vehicles, or, if it was economical for people to buy those things to be better to the planet, then we would
in our
all do it.
area, it's different. You
Yeah.
know, we're not further south, and we get these extreme temperatures, and
Right.
people can't be sustained by those heat pumps.
No.
They just don't work.
And this is the balancing act that we need to figure out. We need to have a long-term plan that addresses climate change, but at the same time recognizes that we can't have $2,000 utility bills. It's just not sustainable. Which is why, again, I go back to nuclear. But it is, it's tough. And it goes back to the durable policy thing that I mentioned about how Congress needs to pass things, not the executive. The auto industry has tried to figure out how do we manufacture cars with constantly changing standards from one administration to the next, right? So it was 54 was the goal with Obama. 54 was going to be the set mile per gallon standard. Then that changed under Trump. It went back under Obama, and then it changed again under Trump. And this was always a future goal. Now imagine that you are a CEO of a car company, and you're like, okay, so in the past 12 years, they kept changing this standard and what it's going to be in the future. How do you develop cars? Well, the way they do it is more expensively. They said, fine, we'll just take a shot at where we think legislation is going to be, and if we produce cars and it ends up being 54 and we can't meet that standard, we're not going to be able to sell our products. So then they have producing under that standard that no longer exists, and what happens? We have a higher price for vehicles now. To buy cars, it is more expensive simply because of the vacillation in policy. So those are the actual real-life impacts of these changes. It affects the amount of money left in our bank accounts because of what we pay for fuel, for what we pay for a car.
All right, thank you both. Ma'am?
So you're speaking to the your audience here, but if you did win the primary, according to the latest poll that I heard, NY21 still has a 52% Trump approval rating. How are you going to convince 3% to vote for you.
Which poll is that? Which poll?
That's I can't remember the name of the company that Mr. Gensler used.
Yeah.
It was out last week or something, but it was a middle of the road poll. I saw it too and was depressed.
I'm just curious. I didn't see it, but
Courage. Yeah.
you know, I have these tough conversations every day. My father-in-law is a 3-time Trump voter, and I think where we find common ground is our love of service and our love of country and our belief that in Washington there has been too little accountability for far too long. I've had countless conversations with folks who are unaffiliated voters in our district or Republicans, and they've asked me about tariffs at the northern border. And they've asked me about National Grid jacking up our utility costs. In fact, 2 women stopped me at the Franklin County Fair and said, I voted for a lease every single cycle and I can't anymore because these Medicaid cuts are personal. My son is severely disabled and I don't know where he's going to get his care. One of my philosophies in this campaign has been organizing in houses rather than the traditional Democratic infrastructure. Rather than the committee meetings that seem to be the only place Blake shows up to, I've been organizing in my neighbors' homes, asking people to invite in 20, 30 of their friends and their families and their neighbors, because we have to hear what's on people's minds and what is important to them, meet them where they're at. And these 2 older folks in Glens Falls came up to me and they said, we moved here from Nashville. We're lifelong Republicans. We've had leaf signs out in our yard for the last few cycles that we've lived here. But we walked away thinking that we would want to vote for you because of 2 things. One, you're a man of strong faith and you believe in the optimism of our people and the aspiration of what we dream to be here in the North Country, that we think we should have a life of dignity, and that I'm willing to take on the big power and corruption that has squeezed us out. And that brings me back to conversations that I've had with my father-in-law for years now, thinking about how big corporations have taken our data, taken our privacy away from us. They're able to jack up the cost of flights on the internet when you're searching around. I just read an article about how Walmart's changing their price tags in grocery stores to be digital, and that is surveillance pricing. It's all about data and freedom, where big corporations are able to jack up our costs all because of behavior that they see in our internet searches on how rushed we are when we come into a grocery store. And so that cuts across party lines. That means at the end of the day that we deserve to live an affordable life of dignity, that we need to take back the freedom that has been taken from us. And that's the campaign I'm running, and it's the campaign that has organized people in their homes, across party lines, that we're willing to say that folks here deserve that life of dignity.
Is your father-in-law voting for you?
Well, he doesn't live here, he lives in rural Arkansas, but I'll tell you, if he could, he would.
Not that there's any Stuart.
Yeah, it's an important question, and it is going to be hard regardless. You're right. I saw that poll, and we also know the history. The last time we had a Democrat win was when the Republican ticket was split. So without that, I don't know. That was with Owens. I don't know how long it would have been if that hadn't happened. So it's going to be hard, and I think it is important for us to select the right candidate. We can talk about why we think we are the right fit for this particular area, this demographic. But it is not just on us, it's on all of us. I said, not to put you on the spot again, JJ, but as I said at the Dinner for Democracy, that it is easy to have conversations with friends. What we're doing here today is enjoyable and it's easy because we all believe in basically the same things. But we need to do something more, all of us. Democracy demands something more from us, and it is more difficult, is we have to have conversations not just with those that agree with us, but with those who disagree. Because, again, Trump didn't steal the election. He won. People voted for him. So we need to have those conversations and say, listen, this is why we believe what we believe. We both agree that these problems exist. Let me tell you why our solutions are better and while I fix it. So I think it's incumbent on all of us to have that conversation. And I think in terms of my approach is, and I think it's Dylan's approach, and I'm sure it's Blake's as well. As I always say, I've gotten to know them a lot, because maybe not Blake as much, but we show up at a lot of events. So we have a chance to talk before and after. But, you know, none of us are changing our positions because we think, oh, this is how we win the election. This is what the district is, this is how I should change. I'm not. I am assuming I'm speaking for you properly. But, you know, all we can do is say, this is what we believe in. This is who I am, and this is what I think the solutions are. And this is why a primary is important, because it gives voters a chance to hear multiple options and say, you know what, I think this is what's best for the North Country or Northern New York. This is what I think best fits with me. Without a primary process, you don't have that option. So where I am and where I fall on the spectrum, not to use labels, but would be, I was a registered independent for decades. The committees, Democratic committees, do not like me very much for that. They pointed out, hey, you just registered as a Democrat recently. You must just be doing that to run. And that's true. I'll admit to that. I believe that you have to be either a Republican or a Democrat to have a shot at winning an election. That is the nature of American democracy and the American ballot at the moment. And if you want to have a shot, you have to be one or the other. Sure, you can run as an independent to make your voice heard, but if you actually want to make change, you have to get elected. But like I said, I had no ambition to run for Congress. So I was an independent because I believed the policy that you support shouldn't be based on what a particular party tells you to believe. It should be based on what you think the right policy is. And there are policies that I align more so on the conservative side. And I will still have that position if I'm elected. And I do think that that aligns with this district. I think when you look at the percentage of independents that exist here, it's staggering. So it is going to be hard. It will be difficult to win. But I think we need to do two things. We need to reach those independents. We need to make sure that every Democrat shows up to vote. We need to make sure that every vote that is out there is cast in support of the Democratic candidate. We need to make that case with the independents, and then we need to hope for a split ticket, which could happen between Smolin and Constantino, and I think that's what we're looking at, but it is going to be difficult.
Thanks, Stuart. One more in the back.
Which of the two current Republican candidates would you prefer?
Come on!
Because they're both tempers, one's harsher than the other. I'm just curious where you would be on this. What's the easier mark for you?
I think we're in agreement. If you want to go ahead, and I'm going to say already, I agree with what he's going to say.
You go ahead first. That's okay.
Okay. Of the two, absolutely, I would support Smolin. I think, yeah, I mean, I don't know where to begin to answer that question. I mean, here's a guy that gets escorted out by, the sheriff at a Republican committee meeting.
That's not hard to do.
Well, no, but, I mean, I don't understand how Constantino is even in the mix. So, yeah, Smolin.
Money?
Well, yes, it is his money, it is the self-funding, but I hope that there is more. I'm embarrassed that Constantino is in this. I'm embarrassed as a North Country resident. I'm embarrassed as a person running for Congress. I am embarrassed as an American, and I am embarrassed as a human.
So,
I think people are tired of politics as usual, that we are really fed up with a cynical playbook that has been fed to us to settle for less time and again. And I'm ready and willing to take either of them on. But I'm also in this primary because Blake Chesterfield also hasn't said who he voted for president. So if we're asking between Robert Smolin and Anthony Constantino, who seem to be in a race to the bottom to support President Trump, we should also ask him, who did you vote for?
We have asked him.
Was that a Smolin?
It's a bring it on, and I'm ready.
all right, so we have a little bit more time left, and but we'll turn that into a press the flesh moment, and you guys can get a little water and go to the men's room if you need to.